Hello everyone, what's going on? I'm Gav, the Master974, back again today, and welcome to another Valve source code tutorial follow-up video. And today I'm going to be following up on a very special Valve source code tutorial number 25, which was how to add 3 Half-Life 2 beta weapons into a Source 2013 mod. Those 3 weapons being the Combine Guard Gun, the Immolator, and the Fire Extinguisher. Now, there were some problems that were brought to my attention after I did the video, and so yeah, let's just get right into it. So the first weapon I'm going to be following up on is the Combine Guard Gun. Now, one of the things that I noticed is that you can actually drop or holster the weapon while it's in the middle of firing. So let's just get into what you can do to stop this from happening. Now, the weapon drop system I'm talking about is actually from tutorial number 34. So I'm only going to be concerning the way that I added a weapon drop system. I know there's another way to do it, but this is my Valve source code tutorial series, so I'm going to be following up on the weapon drop system that I talked about in the video. And it goes without saying that this little section that I'm going to outline here is a bit of a minor follow-up to that video. So anyway, the first thing you want to do is go to base combat weapon shared.h, and somewhere in that code in a public section, you want to add a virtual ball called can_drop, passing through void inputs, and make it return true. Now, there is a macro called true in all capital letters that you can use. I really don't know if it makes any difference to use true in all lowercase or all capitals, so I just used all capitals to mix things up a little bit. But then in hl2player.cpp, inside of the client command function, you want to find the p-weapon if statements, and again this is only assuming you've followed my specific weapon drop tutorial, and above the weapon drop slot line, as you'll see in the video, you want to add if p-weapon arrow can drop. Then you want to go to weapon cguard.cpp, and in the class declaration for c-weapon cguard, you want to add a ball called can drop and a ball called can holster, both passing through void inputs. And then somewhere in the code you can expand these functions out as follows. So you want to create a ball called cweapon cguard : can drop, passing through void inputs. And in this function you want to say if m_b fired, then return false, and then return base class : can drop. And you can pretty much copy paste the code, but just replace can drop with can holster, because can holster is pretty much just going to do the exact same thing. So you can just replace the word drop with holster. Now, we're going to be changing the functionality of the Combine Guard Gun just a little bit to make it more in line with the way the AR2 alt fire works. So what you want to do is go to the constructor and change m_b fired to be false. Then in the update lasers function, in the if statement regarding the charge time and only updating the lasers whilst charging, in the or part with m_b fired, just put an exclamation mark in front of m_b fired. Then in the primary attack function underneath the if statement regarding m_fl charge time, you want to add if m_b fired then return. And at the very end of the function you want to make m_b fired true. Next, in the item post frame function, you want to change m_b fired is exactly equal to false to m_b fired is exactly equal to true. And lastly, at the very top of the delayed fire function, you want to add m_b fired equals false, and then remove the if m_b fired return and m_b fired equals true lines. So as I just said, this functionality is very similar to the way the AR2 works, and funnily enough, the same weapon drop prevention code that I outlined here could also apply to the AR2 as well, because in the current state you can't holster the AR2 if you begin a charged attack, but you can drop the weapon, again assuming you've added a weapon drop function. And so there could be other cases like the RPG or the hopwire grenade, the black hole version specifically, where you might think this should apply as well. So what you can do is let me know in the comments if you think there are other weapons that should be accommodated for this sort of weapon drop prevention stuff. And when I get around to updating my GitHub page with all of the code that I've done with the follow-up videos and previous guides, then I'll make sure to include that for the update when it happens. Now, one of the things that I do want to improve with the Combine Guard Gun in time is the effects, because one of the things I want to do is make it look more like the missing information version, but seeing as the code for that mod hasn't been released, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Now, I do know that it was brought to my attention in the comments by Total Chaos that the laser beams for the Combine Guard Gun and even the Immolator don't shoot from the muzzle attachment position, but rather from the player's eye position, just displaced slightly. Now, you can actually make it so the beams start from the muzzle position, supposing the view model actually has a muzzle attachment point, but there's going to be issues because sometimes the vector that corresponds to the muzzle's actual position in-game can be invalid. Not really sure why that happens, and even when testing for this video, I actually couldn't get the beams to even draw properly, because reasons. So for those reasons, I'm not actually going to be discussing how you can improve the effects in this video, you're just going to have to deal with the effects the way that they are at the moment. Alright, so let's move on to the Immolator next. Now, one of the things that I am sure was brought to my attention was that the sound of the Immolator fires if the weapon is holstered or dropped, and it also looks like the Immolator beam doesn't draw properly when it is dropped and then picks back up again, but the ammo subtracts properly. But anyway, let's resolve these issues. So now you want to go to weaponimmolator.cpp, and inside of the class declaration for C-Weapon Immolator, you want to add a ball called holster, passing through an input of a C-based combat weapon called *P switching to, a void drop, passing through inputs of a const vector called &vec_velocity, and void equip, passing through an input of a C-based combat character called *P owner. Now you want to go to the item post frame function and copy paste the is currently firing and m_fl next attack time static variables to be above the item post frame function. That way we can actually access these in the code that we're about to write. Okay, and now we can just define the functions as follows. So for example, we have ball C-Weapon Immolator : holster, passing through an input of a C-based combat weapon called *P switching to, and in this function you just want to say stop immolating, is currently firing equals false, m_fl next attack time equals 0.0f, and then return base class : holster of p switching to, and then you can pretty much copy paste this code, do the same thing for drop, just replace the ball with void, replace holster with drop, replace the input to a const vector called &vec_velocity, and then do base class : drop of vec_velocity at the end. And then for the equip function, you don't need to do the stop immolating line, but you still want to do the is currently firing equals false, m_fl next attack time equals 0.0f, and then base class : equip of p owner. And it's also worth mentioning as well that it should be a void C-Weapon Immolator : equip of a C-based combat character called *p owner. So that's really all I have to say for the Immolator. With these changes being made, you should no longer have the weapon sound or the beam having any sort of issues when switching weapons or dropping weapons. So that's all I really need to say about that. And the last thing I'm going to get to is the fire extinguisher, and for this I do need to give a bit of a thank you and shout out to Mazdo, who informed me of issues with this fire extinguisher through private messages, and also for providing the framework to fix these sort of issues for the Immolator and even the Combine Guard Gun, so massive thank you there. So the issues are pretty much exactly the same as I just outlined for the Immolator, which is that the sound and particle effects basically continue when the weapon's switched out or dropped. So now we can go to weaponextinguisher.cpp, and in the class declaration for C-Weapon Extinguisher you want to add a ball called holster passing through an input of a C-based combat weapon called *p switching to, and void drop passing through an input of a const vector called &vec_velocity, and then somewhere in the code you can expand the functions like so. So you want ball C-Weapon Extinguisher : holster passing through an input of a C-based combat weapon called *p switching to, and in this function you want to do stop jet, stop particle effects of, to base player of, get owner, and then after the to base player function just do arrow get view model with brackets after it as you'll see in the video, then stop weapon sound of single, and then return base class : holster of p switching to, and then you can pretty much copy paste the code, and much like as I said with the Immolator, just replace the ball with void, replace holster with drop, replace the input to const vector and vec velocity, and then replace the last line with base class : drop of vec velocity. And that's pretty much all you need to do. If you save and compile the code, then you should no longer see the fire extinguisher particle effects happen when switching or dropping weapons, and the sound should also stop when doing those actions. So that is pretty much all I need to say for this follow-up video. I know I've delayed it for a lot longer than I wanted to, considering how short the actual code changes are. And without wasting too much of your time, all I really need to say is thank you for watching. Let me know about the weapons that could do with the anti-weapon drop code function, and I'll add that stuff to the GitHub at some point. And yeah, have a great day, peace out, see you later, and hopefully the next Valve source code tutorial follow-up video is coming out very soon. So check that out, and see you later.